and welcome to Brainstorm. I am your host, Craig Birchall. I am here with my co-host, James Roth, and we are very lucky today. We have the head of Galaxy Lending, Max Bareiss. Max, it is great to have you on the podcast. We very recently had your head of research, Alex Thorne, on for a very good conversation, and we are just very excited to now have you here today with us.
I mean, my only goal today is to make sure that we get more views than Alex Thorne, because that would just really rub it into him that people here are really looking for lending content.
So, Max, a lot going on right now, obviously, in the industry. And we thought, what better way to kick off than just to better hear about, look, maybe you could let the viewers know what you do in Galaxy Lending, what Galaxy Lending, the types of products that you offer, and how it kind of fits into the broader franchise, just for anyone that might not be aware.
Yeah, so I'll just kind of run through all of our different products. I think bread and butter is Bitcoin as collateral, typical margin loan. So we'll lend cash. If it falls, the value of the Bitcoin falls, we'll margin call. We'll get top ups, pretty simple. Prime brokerage style. So things like levered long, 2x levered long is probably the easiest way to think about it. Counterparty post Bitcoin. They use that Bitcoin to borrow cash. They use that cash and then they buy Bitcoin with that cash. Levered short, which is an oxymoron, I know, but it's the exact same product, but opposite. So you take something like Solana, you borrow that, you sell it short to cash, and then that cash proceeds serves as like the 100% initial, and then it would require a small top up. Jason Urban Special, the collar loan. So sell a call, buy a put, use that call collect to pay down your interest rate, and you can get effectively 0% interest rate loans. We started to get into some more exotic things, some asset-backed stuff. I think early 21, 22, ASIC-backed financing was super popular. It was something that you could really underwrite the value pretty easily because it was a liquid market for ASICs. However, I think a lot of people got burned doing that just because although you could assess the value, it was highly correlated to Bitcoin. And as a result, as those started to drop in value, the margin call process, the collapsing on the collateral left a lot of lenders kind of warehousing things like ASICs. So we've taken a new view of miner finance 2.0. So as you may know, we are a large scale miner, which gives us that expertise in underwriting mining sites. But we really look top down, full mining scale operations. So we're looking at things like land, infrastructure. We're looking at what kind of builds do they have? Is it MMU? Is it immersion? Is it typical data center build, prop versus hosting, et cetera? So we'll do that whole holistic modeling, put it into a discounted cash flow, spit out a value, and then do something like a loan to value off of that. We did a CLO for Arch Lending. That was one that we had a little bit of press on as well. Allowed us to tap into additional markets and really touch retail without actually touching retail, which was a really good development for us. And then really we'll take a look at anything that's crypto or crypto adjacent, as long as we're able to feel good about the underwriting process, as long as we feel comfortable with establishing our lien and feel good about how we value that asset and extend a comfortable loan to value off of that.
Yeah, so just going back to I had a quick question regarding on the mining side. So it kind of sounds like you've stepped into kind of the corporate lending standpoint where everything kind of under the hood, not necessarily lending against just ASICs, but lending against the entire corporate structure where miners, historically, maybe the banks are reticent to lend, or there's not a lot of capital available for those folks. But really, as a corporate lender, it's kind of where you guys have stepped in many ways.
Yeah, I mean, it's a product that we should be doing because we're strategically positioned to do it. So in the event that we have to collapse on these assets, we know how to navigate the restructuring process. In worst case scenario, we're taking on these mining sites that are fully operational for liquidation value in a restructuring. And so from that side of things, we feel really good that we're comfortable with the assets. And if we had to own them, we could. End of the day, we're a lender. We want to get paid back. But if we had to take those assets on, we know exactly what we're doing. And we have that team that could step in and pretty much run that site like day one.
I did want to ask in terms of, when we think about some of the more, so that was more on the illiquid side, more on the liquid side, depending on your perspective in the kind of, we'll call it alt segment. What are you guys seeing in terms of, you'd mentioned Bitcoin, I'm assuming, Ether is something you traffic a lot in terms of a collateral asset. Have you guys started kind of moving into more using alts as collateral, or is it really kind of the vast majority of the lending still sits, at least on a bilateral basis, in the kind of majors?
Different than what your question is. We're lending a lot more alts for sure. So we have these sources for the alts, and I think there's a lot of VCs that are trying to hedge positions. And so we have access to pretty much any and every alt under the sun, where we're lending a lot more altcoins. In terms of taking alts as collateral, that's a completely different thing. And we're open to it. It just really comes down to the underwriting process. So we're taking a look at things like, what is the average daily trading volume? What is the largest move in these altcoins dating back to 2020? They don't have a life back to 2020. It's harder for us to underwrite. And so it's less likely that we're going to be taking that in as collateral or trying to figure out exactly what it is. We're open to looking at everything, but it is inherently more risky lending against altcoins, and that will be reflected in something like LTV, or the amount of collateral we're willing to take in, which ultimately then backs into the amount of cash or whatever we're willing to extend against those alts. In that same vein, we're seeing a lot more pair trades. So people are borrowing a native crypto, so like an L1 currency, for example, and they are shorting that against something like a protocol currency. So something along the lines of the new administration's coming in, and they'll anoint some of like the DEXs, for example, is like, you don't have to worry about operating in the US, and you could see a strong pump for some of those governance tokens if they actually start to have material value against it. That's more of a trading strategy things, but that's one of the things that I'm seeing is like a market trend.
Now, and what other trends are you seeing in the space? Because we've been hearing that there's kind of a starvation for leverage among not only like market makers, but also a lot of the prime brokers are looking for as much capital as they can get. And then almost as a secondary to that question, are you also maybe seeing different types of counterparties that you're engaging with generally that are coming out of the recent moves?
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, crypto lending rates are largely driven by like forwards curves. So you're looking at things like CME basis, and that largely sets what our interest curve will be. So you can look out 1, 2, 3 months. And then you're looking at some of the other data points out there for your lending rates. So things like CoinGlass, for example, or Velo, those really help you understand where some of the open term rates are, as well as on-chain. And so over probably October until about 2.5 weeks ago, demand was the highest it's ever been. Everybody was looking for leverage, and it was a matter of how many lines of credit can I get open and how quickly can I do that so that I can continue to fulfill this demand for my clients. Over the last, I would call it 10 to 20 days since some of the Trump tariff stuff kind of started creeping into the market, and you started to see a little bit less certainty in the market. So whenever you have uncertainty, you're obviously going to have some of this leverage taken off. You're going to start to see things trading sideways. So yeah, I mean, I've seen a ton of demand over the last quarter and a half, and it's been a great time to be in crypto lending. To answer your other question, which was, am I seeing new counterparties entering the space? The answer is definitely. I think you're really starting to see some of these traditional financial institutions entering the space. I think they're starting to realize that the perceived crypto risk was mispriced to what you actually have as a collateral asset and the returns you're able to get lending cash against something like Bitcoin. And now that they're able to take it as collateral, it's super interesting for them because they can take in this liquid asset. They're able to lend cash against it, and you're really putting yourself in a position to make some really good risk-adjusted returns.
Yeah, it's. I mean, we always felt like that was coming. It's a really nice position to being, selling water in the desert, which is, it kind of felt like Galaxy was, with the kind of what we saw in terms of some of the competitors kind of drop off post FTX, post Three Arrows, et cetera. So we were kind of always waiting for that to step in. I think the administration gives it a lot of, call it, latitude for, folks, in addition to obviously the collateral assets being a bit more comfortable around that. But I'm sure, the new administration and being, less hardened on views around crypto has a lot to do with that. When you see kind of these new entrants come in, when you think about kind of product development, or you think about what you're doing to sort of get ahead of the curve or things like that, is there anything meaningfully different? And it can be, trying to source additional capital. We obviously know Galaxy has a really strong balance sheet, but are there any moves that you're trying to make differently as you prepare for, either it could be the new administration or kind of these new entrants, and trying to not necessarily ward them off? Because I do think, having more capital in the space, it just kind of lubricates markets a little bit more. So it might overall be a good thing. But is there anything that you guys are maybe, kind of expanding the product offering to, or trying to position Galaxy as, in terms, as a means of being more competitive in the lending space? Or, is it just sticking to the knitting?
So, I would say that I spend far more of my time focusing on the future than maybe the rest of my team. I think a lot of the flow-based lending is always going to be there. And so I do spend a ton of time trying to open up new lines of credit. And then really the new opportunities from a lending standpoint come to me through sales. And I'm happy to then go deeper and expand on, here's what you can do to have a slightly better product. And I'm pulled into those calls. To your point of what can Galaxy do, what is Galaxy doing to sort of differentiate themselves from some of the people that are coming in, it's engaging with as many people as possible, negotiating those MLAs. So when these trades come up, you're ready to go. So I think there's a concept of being faster, and having that first mover advantage is super important. And that's where we're positioning ourselves, as well as doing some of the things that I think that we're uniquely positioned to do, like the minor finance, like the CLO kind of construct, the different areas of the crypto landscape where we just have a deeper understanding than some of our peers. Things like staking, like protocol positioning as well, is super important. Like, taking in staked assets will be something that will be crypto native for a very long time as TradFi starts dipping in. Doing things like Bitcoin is what they're going to start with, and then they're going to realize there's a whole host of assets out there, and we got to figure out what we're doing, and we're positioned really well to take advantage of the fact that we're crypto native at the end of the day.
And how have you been thinking about, so like you mentioned the traditional financial players, getting yourself ready and established with them. I think that there's probably a difference between custodial banks, as well as like private credit funds and things like that. Like, we have the SAB 121 ruling, but there's also like Basel rules and components on that. Like where are you sort of seeing the regulatory environment? And is there anything that you feel like people are able to start executing on now, and anything that people are sort of looking out for from the traditional space? And is it from some players more so than others in the conversations you've had?
So honestly, I really thought that TradFi was going to be here quicker than they are. As soon as the ETF got released, I thought what we were going to see is everybody was going to move to Bitcoin ETF as collateral, and people were going to just do delta replacements. You take your Bitcoin, you sell it to ETF, you get leverage off of that. We really haven't seen the traditional players take the Bitcoin ETF in large scale, which was a bit surprising to me. And although I think there's some big time players starting to position themselves within the space and taking Bitcoin as collateral, I do still think that there's going to be a bit of a lag before they're fully up and operational. But they are coming, for sure coming. And so some of the things that we're trying to do is think through Galaxy. While we do have a strong balance sheet, we are nowhere near where some of the large scale banks are in terms of capital. And so what I'd like to do is I would like to position ourselves where we start to become an originator, because we have so many of these MLAs already in place and so many of these deep crypto relationships. We can start to originate these loans, and we could do a CLO kind of construct where we start to tap into something like debt capital markets. We can have these loans originated. You could hold the actual assets in tri-party at the custodian of your choosing. And then what we could do is start tranching off debt, get the debt rated, and then place this debt that has liquid assets as collateral that is marginable into the hands of things like insurance funds or sovereign wealth funds who are just trying to get yield on cash. And this is one of the best areas where I think it's still mispriced because people have that perceived crypto risk, as opposed to, some of the other things that they're investing in that are much more illiquid and would require time to then liquidate that. And if there's large scale things like in 2008 that happened, I mean, crypto, yes, it's volatile, but it's still liquid at the end of the day. And you're able to then figure out a way to liquidate the collateral or take in additional assets as margin top up.
And in that model, would you guys look to, because you have the expertise and kind of the infrastructure on it, would you also look to be servicers of those loans, or purely just the originators?
I would want to be the servicer for sure. I think that having that control is super important. And then on top of that, like, we are truly set up as a 24/7, 365 nights, weekends, holidays. There's no letting up. It's both a blessing and a curse. We are fully operational nights, weekends. I don't know if you saw some of the things with like MoonPay. They were talking about how they called Galaxy on the holiday weekend, and Novo tapped his team. That was largely like a mix of me and a few others, where we were fully operational Saturday, Sunday of that inauguration, getting in large scale loans.
Sounds like some exciting weekends.
It was exciting. Yes, we'll use that word.
Are there any interesting tidbits that we haven't read in the press about that? Or, it must have been pretty exciting. I mean, it felt like I was reading an article. It felt like more of I don't want to say like a movie, reading more of a movie script, but it did feel quite sensational.
I was going through and calling a mix of like our CIO, our global head of trading, our chief risk officer, compliance, legal, in a circle with also like the president, the CEO of MoonPay, their legal representatives, BlackRock. I had 76 phone calls from 1 p.m. until midnight on that day, just making sure that we pull everything together and working literally as hard as we possibly could to get that thing off the ground.
Man, 76, man. There's got to be a record or something. I mean, it must be up there, I have to say.
It was much to my
other than a call center.
I mean, we were at a date for my, and she's like, "You're being rude," and I was like, "I don't have a choice. Like, this is in trading. You have a couple of days where you're gonna like make a big amount in a day or weekend, and you just got to take advantage of it."
These are the types of moments where it's difficult to, and yes, the final sort of what I'll call realization of a loan can take place on chain, and there can be interesting ways to kind of make it transparent. But it kind of does highlight the need for humans to be in the middle, apart from sort of an automated process. Is that kind of your view, at Galaxy around just thinking, okay, the bilateral markets are always going to be healthy. We're always going to need negotiations. There's always going to need to be human intervention. And yes, there's, some amazing innovations that are taking place, but that was really the magic in order to make that deal happen.
I mean, there's a lot of things outside of like technology that you need to do. And some of it is understanding structured finance in a way where you understand how do you actually take a lien on something, and like the nuance and the art of doing it is not something that we're currently at from a technology standpoint, where you need to make sure that you're relying on your lawyers to make sure that you're putting yourself in a position where you have the protections needed to be able to understand what the risk is for the perceived return. And so making sure that you're not mispricing credit risk is very, very important. And I don't know if necessarily the industry always does that, right? Like we definitely saw that in 22, and we got to make sure we don't do that again. So having that human component and making sure you have the proper checks and balances is 100% necessary.
Yeah, and we saw, I mean, not to toot your guys' horn, but we did see kind of when things went south, it was really the folks that took a credit first approach that really managed to stand the test of time and really and make it. And so that conservatism, or just the ability to like more accurately price the risk, does hold the day in these circumstances as we've seen. But it actually it made me think of something that be interesting to your opinion in terms of, and it could be crypto related, or it could be just general lending. Is there anything non-blockchain related that you look at from the technology side, and just given the way crypto is, you wish it were part of the tech stack, or you wish there were more kind of innovations around the technology being built around lending that you wish were available but maybe weren't, or there was something maybe in that moment with MoonPay that, man, I wish I had more visibility into where rates are, where credit was, or I don't want to lead the witness, but is there anything that kind of sticks out as we've now evolved in crypto lending from where it once was to where it is, obviously ups and downs? Does anything stick out?
I mean, the obvious thing, and the reason why it's not answering your question, but the reason why it's so great is the fact that crypto allowed for us to do this on the weekend. Like you can't move cash on the weekend. So it's that, I don't know if the word's archaic, because I think there's also like a good disconnect for, the rest of the world to have something like nights and weekends and holidays off. But things where we couldn't get in touch with somebody to confirm, for example, the BlackRock securities that are there that we had been able to see, but just talking to a human to make sure that like there's no element of fraud going on. And so it's just the transparency, the proof type of thing probably could be enhanced. Like things aren't 24/7 in the traditional sense. And I feel like we're sort of moving into a world where even outside of crypto, people are working on, off hours. And because of that, having access to the information you need on those off hours is incredibly important.
Right. So it's not just, stablecoin is a big innovation that gets you 24/7 with fiat, but then you've got crypto that's 24/7, but it's also, hey, what sort of visibility do we have into assets that maybe don't live in this blockchain world? How can we get visibility into that? Whether it's a mirror that can somehow live on the blockchain that can give us, but at the end of the day, markets are closed, between those hours. So it's kind of difficult to get there. So I guess we can really appreciate the pain, but at least I kind of like that, because maybe then, we'll have some sanctity on the weekends, and maybe you won't get those calls as much, or maybe your weekends, maybe we all want our weekends to just be destroyed all the time.
Well, Max, I mean, I think that kind of wraps up all the questions that we have here. I know, we really appreciate you coming on, and James, I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to ask.
No. I just, Max, thanks so much for taking the time. We really appreciate it. I think a lot of people are going to find kind of the insights into what Galaxy's doing in the space super interesting. So, we're grateful for the time and would love to do it again sometime.
Yeah, always happy to come back on. It's great to see you guys. So appreciate you having me here, and let's look to do this again soon.